Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome tonight to this live season preview for the 2021 Formula 1 season. Hope you guys are doing well on what is a Thursday evening for me. Whatever part of the world you're from, hopefully you are doing very well tonight, and hopefully you are just as excited as I am for the new 2021 Formula 1 season, where we're going to have a very close field in the midfield. Some people, well, not even some, plenty of people are talking about a possible title challenge from Red Bull this season, which, we'll get into that in a moment and what I think about it. I think you guys can probably guess what I think about it, but you have that, and just a closer field, I think, definitely in 2021. Even if Mercedes do win again, it won't be, they won't be as quick compared to the other teams as they were last year. So I think we are definitely in for a closer season, hopefully better season. Last season was pretty good, to be honest. We didn't have, I don't think we had many great races. We had plenty of good ones. I'm not sure we had many, again, great races. Plenty of great moments, though, and I'm sure we'll get plenty of those in 2021 in this 23 race season. As you see, scrolling along the bottom of your screen for the rest of the stream will be, in case you don't know, the calendar for 2021. And of course, we start in Bahrain this weekend, and then it's a 3-week break until the race at Imola on the second to last weekend of April, the 18th, or 17th and 18th of April is that Grand Prix. But first, I think what we're going to do is go into the teams and what I think, coming out pre-season testing, how I think those teams are going to do. Then after that, we're going to go into each individual driver, and I'm going to give a quick preview as to how I think they'll do this season. Then we'll get into some of the storylines that I think will occur during 2021. And then finally, I will reveal my predictions for the Constructors' Championship and my full Drivers' Championship prediction as well. When I mean full prediction for the Drivers' Championship, I mean all 20 positions. So don't worry, it won't just be a top 10. It'll be a full-on 20. And I think you guys will be maybe not surprised massively, but, you'll be interested, I think, in what I have predicted for 2021. Now, let's first get into the teams. And of course, we'll start with Mercedes. Just having to lean over just to click onto the Mercedes pictures. Probably have to move my mouse in a minute so I can actually reach that, to click a bit quicker. But yeah, Mercedes, I still think, preseason testing was, of course, not that great for them. Probably the worst preseason testing they've had in a very long time. They weren't as reliable as they wanted to be. The car did, at times, look unstable, but most of the time I thought it looked pretty good. And I still think they were holding a lot back in testing of, a couple of weeks ago. I still think they will have the best car. They are the team to beat, of course. Even if you think Red Bull have the faster car at this point, you cannot deny that this team is the team to beat. I don't see, in 2021, though, again, like I've said a couple weeks ago, like I said in the pre-season testing review that I uploaded yesterday from me and Nib. If you don't check that out, by the way, it's in the description down below. Make sure to go and check that out. I still think, despite the couple issues they've had, I still think this team is easily the team to beat, and I still think they will easily win the World Championship. Red Bull should be closer, and I think maybe Mercedes will start the season off, say in the first 3 Grand Prix, which is Bahrain, and then Imola, and then Portimao in Portugal. I think Red Bull might be a bit closer than we're expecting. But I think once we get, to the Spanish Grand Prix and Monaco Grand Prix, I think you'll really start to see Mercedes properly get on top of this car and then just run away with it completely. And I still think in the first 3 Grand Prix, they'll still end up winning. So I just don't see this team really, in a position where they are actually under serious threat. I just don't see it. There's plenty of people going on about, Max Verstappen, he could win the championship this year. I don't see it at all. I really don't see it. And I think people are saying that out of hope, honestly, rather than actual, that being based on data, on facts. And of course, we'll know a lot more of the facts of the situation after this weekend's first Grand Prix of the season, once Mercedes actually show what they've got. But I think ultimately this team still wins, say 17 or 18 of the 23 races at least in 2021. And I saw a great video earlier. Can't remember the guy's name. He didn't have that many subscribers, I think 500 subs, and it was a video called Why Red Bull Will Not Win the Championship. Again, can't remember his name. He was an American YouTuber. And if anyone knows, then make sure to, mention his name in the comments, and then I'll try and plug his channel because I thought it was a pretty good video. And he got into the stats of, Mercedes versus Red Bull in the last 4 seasons. And it really did illustrate, and I think back up my point, that, it's so hard to beat Mercedes currently because they are so clinical when it comes to pole positions, race wins, even podiums. I mean, Mercedes the last 2 or 3 years have ended up winning, 13, 14 Grand Prix at least? That is what you've got to do to even compete with this team seriously for a championship. You've got to win. Probably at the very least, if you say, if McLaren and... Let me just hold on a minute. Just going to try and move this picture a bit up on the screen and just move my mouse at the minute so I can do that a bit easier. So there you go. That's a better angle there, of course. And as I was saying, you've got to win. Yeah. If McLaren this season win a couple Grand Prix, and then you have, say, Ferrari or someone win a Grand Prix, then if you're Red Bull, you've got to win at least 10 Grand Prix, at least, to have a serious chance of winning the World Championship. Does anyone out there honestly believe that Red Bull and Max Verstappen can win 10 races in 2021? I think, they can win 2 or 3 like they normally do, season on season, but 10 at least? I think there you really see just how much of a uphill climb it is, again, to beat Mercedes. So I think Mercedes will be fine. I think they'll win the championship, of course, the Constructors and the Drivers' Championship with Lewis Hamilton. Again, in the first 2 or 3 races, the gap will be smaller, but I think over time, Mercedes will shut everyone up as to this whole, Max Verstappen can win the World Championship, which I think is just complete rubbish. It's born, really, again, out of hope rather than actual, I think, facts at this current point. If Red Bull, turn up in Bahrain this weekend and they get pole and they win the Grand Prix on pure pace, then yeah, maybe it is born on pure facts. But at this current point, again, how can people honestly say that when Mercedes have just come off of probably their most dominant season in terms of the speed their car had? And if you just look at what they had last year of their car, it was probably the best Mercedes car they've ever produced and probably the best F1 car of all time. So, again, this team, I just don't see being beaten. Honestly, I hope they are beaten this season. I hope we do get Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton. But my head is saying, no, Mercedes are going to win 18, 19 races this season. And I honestly do think that'll happen. But people have been, again, going on about Red Bull as possible title challengers and even having currently the best car on the grid. Let me move those pictures up again for you guys. There you go. Which... yeah, Red Bull did have a very good pre-season testing program. and Red Bull coming out of testing look the best they have come out of testing for a very, very long time. I think everyone can agree on that. Red Bull looking good, and have definitely closed the gap, you know, a bit to Mercedes in terms of the pace difference between the cars. But Red Bull having the best car on the grid, just don't see it. I just do not see it. I think if that is though to come true, it'll be really down to Honda and their decision to bring forward the 2022 power unit to 2021, because of course Honda are leaving officially at the end of the year, even though Red Bull will continue using the power unit of 2021 up until the end of 2024, so, or 2025, one of those years. I think that'll be the biggest reason behind Red Bull's, you know, step up to Mercedes' level, if that is indeed what does happen. But I just realistically don't see it. I think people forget as well, and I think I've said this plenty of times in the last couple of years, that Max Verstappen has continuously in the last couple of years made the Red Bull car look a lot closer to the front of the grid on pace than it actually is, because Max Verstappen is one of those drivers who just makes cars look better because of how just damn quick he is. And I think that was the case especially last season, because I don't think that Red Bull car was really a front-running car at all. It was an upper midfield car that, because it was so acutely designed towards Max Verstappen's needs as a driver, that's what ended up allowing Max Verstappen to finish where he did in the championship and be on the podium so many times. As to, well, you know, if the Red Bull car was actually that close, say 2 or 3 tenths of a second off sometimes in qualifying, if the Red Bull car was actually that close in qualifying, Max would probably be getting pole positions a lot more in the last year or two. So you might get a situation, let's say in the first Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen gets onto the front row or even wins the Grand Prix, purely down, or maybe not purely down, but mostly down to him being so great, rather than the Red Bull having the better car, or having a car that is legitimately just as good as what Mercedes have. So I think people need to be wary of that, because I think Max Verstappen has fooled a lot of people in the last, you know, couple years in making, again, that car look way better than it actually has been. And I think we've seen that in the past with, you know, when Albon's been in that car, when Gasly's been in that car. Hopefully we don't see that as much when Sergio Perez is on the screen now, when he's in the car. But yeah, I think Red Bull, I think a lot of the time will be, you know, between 3 tenths and half a second off in the hands of Max Verstappen. In the hands of Sergio Perez, probably a bit more. But yeah, I think Red Bull will start the season off a bit closer to Mercedes than they, of course, started last season. Last season, the gap was about a second between the two. So I think it'll probably be about half a second between the two in Bahrain. But Red Bull to actually compete for the World Championship, get out of here. That's not happening at all. It really, really is not. If you think so, let me know in the comments or the chat. You know, why do you legitimately think that is the case, based on what we know so far? And also, you know, if you're going to say that, please make sure you do take into account the fact that Mercedes were definitely sandbagging a lot more than Red Bull were in testing. Let's please take that into account, because I think if you look since 2016, Mercedes have only ended up looking definitely quickest out of testing one of those years, and of course won the championships in all of those years. So do take that into account. But I'm going to look at the chat quickly, at the live chat, to see what you guys are saying, and see what you guys think when it comes to Mercedes and Red Bull. Do you guys think, and let me know if you do you guys think that Red Bull can, with Max Verstappen, legitimately win the World Championship? Let me know in the chat, because I am interested to... I'm not only interested to see how many people think this is actually a possibility, I want to know what your reasons are what your realistic reasons are, and I'm hoping it's based on reality rather than just hope. Because again, I think a lot of it so far, especially in the media, is based on hope rather than, again, born out of the facts. So let's see what you guys have to say. Crystal Racing says hi, or ciao. He says, was the American YouTuber Cranky Yankee Motorsport? It wasn't him, it was someone else. Again, this person had, I think, 500 subs. I think he's only just started as a F1 content creator, but I watched it early because I had it recommended to me, and I watched it, and it was a pretty good video, and I really agreed with a lot of it. And it was based on, I guess you would say, the statistical analysis that clearly shows that, the gap in the last 3 or 4 years between these two teams has been quite big. When, of course, into every season we come in saying, oh, Red Bull, they can challenge for the championship, and then it ends up that Mercedes win 10 more races than Red Bull do, and it's not even close. The last time Red Bull actually were able to and competed for the championship was 2013, of course, when they had the best car, and they were the best team, and they won that dominantly. In the V6 era, there's only been 2 teams who have competed for the championship. That's Mercedes and Ferrari. So, yeah. Let me just have a quick look. Blade says, I think it's a slim possibility that this could be their closest year, but it's hard to believe. Need to wait and see. Exactly. Ed Cantwell, great to see you, mate. Also says, in reality, we don't know yet. That's what kind of, I'd say, pisses me off at the minute with the other people's season previews, is they're almost declaring Red Bull not champions, of course, but declaring that yes, they are definitely going to be right up there, when again, we don't know. We really don't know. I could be wrong. They could be right up there, but again, I'm going with my head on this one and saying that Mercedes are still going to have a 3 or 4 tenth of a second gap to Red Bull. But I don't like the whole, again, just declaring, yes, this is the year. Hamilton versus Verstappen. I've seen so much of it. Hamilton versus Verstappen. And even though I would die to see that battle, because that is almost the modern day Senna versus Schumacher, in my opinion. Or the Senna-Schumacher battle that we should have got in the 90s if Ayrton Senna did not die at Imola in 94. Again, it all depends on Red Bull making that car that can be right up there, and they haven't done that in such a long time. I don't trust Red Bull. I really don't trust them to be right up there. Hello to Vladimir in the chat. R says the high rate design of the Red Bull car seems to suit the new regulation updates. Gina says, I don't think Red Bull can win, but I hope Max can fight Mercs for great racing. Yeah, again, I do as well. I really hope Max Verstappen can be up there fighting every Grand Prix with them, but you've got to have, some realism instead of just, saying this is what's going to happen because I want it to. Brabamol says, although I will... or says, maybe you can't win forever, although I will love it when Mercedes wipes the smile off Horner's face in Q3. That's what, when I think to what's going to happen this weekend, that is ultimately what I think is going to happen. We're going to, even after, a couple days of, or not a couple days, a couple sessions, rather, of practice, Red Bull will be looking, good, and we'll say, yeah, Red Bull, they're going to be right up there. They're going to be on pole, possibly. And then we'll get to Q3. And Mercedes will wipe the floor with everyone. I've seen it so many times. I remember 2019. And you can even go back and listen on the channel to the 2019 Australian Grand Prix qualifying watch along. We thought going into that session that Ferrari, I think even in practice, even though they were a bit off, we thought they would close the gap quite a lot in qualifying and be, in the fight. Because around that time period, they normally were. And then you got to Q3, and Mercedes obliterated everyone by, 7 or 8 tenths to the next car. I've seen it so many times that I'm just expecting it to happen. I don't want it to happen, but again, I'm expecting that to be the case once we get to the Grand Prix this weekend. Rooksfoot says constructors maybe if Max and Perez are close enough to pounce on an off-form Bottas plus reliability issues. Again, though, that's a lot to go on for Red Bull, or to lots of things. I think when it comes to the Constructors' Championship, which I think honestly is harder for Red Bull to win than it is for Max to win the championship, the Drivers' Championship. They need a lot to go right. Like you said, Bottas to have a really poor season, reliability issues for Mercedes, and then let's say Red Bull do start the season off for, say, the first 3 or 4 races quicker. I mean, they need all of those things to happen to just have a chance. So it shows you the mountain of the task, and that's why I just don't believe this hype that it's going to happen, because the team, that is champions, it's not like, 11 or 12 years ago when, even though you'd have, McLaren and Ferrari, or maybe not 12 years ago, say 13, 14 years ago, even though you had McLaren and Ferrari winning championships, the mountain to climb to get up to those teams' level and beat them was nowhere near as big as it is now, because those teams, despite winning, were not dominant really ever at those specific time periods. And even Red Bull, when they dominated, I know they won the championship in 2011 and they had an amazing car in 2013 as well. But, in 2012, plenty of times, and even times in 2013, they really, found it hard going to try and beat teams and drivers, like Ferrari with Alonso, Mercedes or McLaren with Lewis Hamilton, or, when Jenson Button was at McLaren. They really found it hard going. Mercedes, in the last, especially 2 years, of course, they had 2017 and 2018 where they were definitely a lot more beatable. But really, in the last couple of years, if you look at the pure results of the races, of course, where the points are scored, they have been so dominant. They've won, it must be almost 90% of the Grand Prix in the last 2 seasons. It's, again, very, very steep mountain to climb, I think. Crystal Racing says, maybe Red Bull might start the season well for once, but we all saw Merc recovering from being just behind Ferrari in 2017 and 18 early to win both championships. And that's another thing. Like you say, it's not new. Mercedes, let's say they are behind Red Bull. Like you say, that's not a completely new thing, because Ferrari were ahead of them in 2017 and 2018. I think 2017, it was more... I think Mercedes in 2017, in the early part, say first 5 or 6 races, definitely had a slightly slower car. But I think from, say, the 7th or 8th race on, I think Mercedes had the best car on the grid. But if you look at the actual championship standings, Sebastian led the championship, Sebastian Vettel, from race 1 until race, I think, 13 it was. So it took a long time for Mercedes to get back to the top, and they did, and then they ran away with it. In 2018, it kind of ebbed and flowed. Hamilton led in the early stages for a bit. Vettel then got back ahead. Ferrari, for most of the first 3 quarters of the season, had, I think, the best car. It wasn't dominant, but I think it was clear enough. But like you said, eventually, once we got into that second half of the season, Mercedes were just on a roll with their car and with their team and just knocked off the race wins like they were nothing. Going to take a lot for Red Bull, as I think, pointed out a lot in the last few minutes. It's going to take a lot for Red Bull to win the championship. I hope they can, but again, it's going to take a lot. Anyway, let's get into the midfield. And we'll start with McLaren, who I think are looking the strongest out of the midfield. Pre-season testing, I thought, went pretty well. They had a couple small reliability issues along the way, but the pace of the car looked good. The grip of the car especially, which of course is more important to see in testing, that looked good. Both drivers look very settled. They weren't as quick as AlphaTauri on the final day of testing, but I think, as was pointed out, AlphaTauri were pushing quite a bit harder than McLaren, and I think Yuki Tsunoda was using quite a bit more DRS on his flying laps than McLaren were on theirs on that final day of testing. So, yeah, I think McLaren, once we come to this Grand Prix, I think this weekend McLaren will have probably the third quickest car on the grid. And I expect them to be getting at least one of their cars into the top 5 in the Grand Prix, finishing race results as well. And I think really for this season, they're just going to build upon what they had last season. I don't think necessarily all season long McLaren are going to be third quickest, clearly ahead of Aston Martin, Alpine, Ferrari, teams like that. But I think for most of the season, McLaren are going to be, in terms of the results of the races, kind of like again last year, where even at times they didn't have a quicker car, they ended up still getting, 15 points at least in the Grand Prix, despite, let's say, at a certain Grand Prix they weren't as quick as Racing Point or as Renault or whatever. So I think this team is, for the other midfield teams this season, definitely, I think, being Ferrari, Aston Martin, Alpine, AlphaTauri, and I think you could maybe throw Alfa Romeo into that as well. McLaren are the team to beat. They really, really are. And I think it is going to be pretty hard for any midfield team to beat them because their driver lineup is very consistent. And has been in the last couple seasons in Formula 1, I think, pretty good. Their car is just getting better. They now have a Mercedes power unit, which I think will give them a slight bit more power than the Renault did last year. Even though the Renault was pretty good last year, I think the Mercedes power unit will give them an extra tenth or two this season, which might at times give them a bit of a gap to the rest. But I think, McLaren, they're looking very strong. Very hard for me to say that any team is going to be better than them in 2021. You're going to have to really either, if you finish a bit lower down last season, say like a team like Ferrari or AlphaTauri, you're really going to have to improve massively on 2020. Or if you're a team like Aston Martin and Alpine, you've got to have a near perfect season, I think, to beat McLaren, because McLaren are going to be for sure stronger than they were in 2020. Not massively, but definitely stronger. So McLaren looking good, and I am really looking forward to their season because, as I think I've said a couple times before in the last month or so, I think McLaren will, if there is a Grand Prix where Mercedes and Red Bull have a bit of a shit race, and there were a couple last year where it allowed Sergio Perez to win in the Racing Point, Pierre Gasly to win in the AlphaTauri. If those races happen, I think McLaren will win a Grand Prix. I don't know what driver it'll be, but I think they will win a Grand Prix. Almost won one last year of Carlos Sainz, and I think they will get to doing that this season. I think considering the work they've put in since the end of 2018 to make the 2019 car just so much better than the car it was the year before, and then so on and so forth for 2020 and now 2021, I believe. I think they deserve a race win just for, again, that work to get back to, or a lot more back to where they should be on the grid. Now, Ferrari. Ferrari should be the biggest improvers this season. I don't think they will end up being the biggest improvers this season. I think that will go to AlphaTauri, who we'll get on to soon enough. But Ferrari this season have got to improve on last season. They cannot afford to finish where they did last season, which of course was 6th. They can't do that again because the consequences, I think, would be massive. Because I think it would just really show that going into the new era, I guess, in 2022, that this team can just not, I just don't think this team can afford that, because it will just showcase that this team just cannot possibly, in that new era, actually get back to the front and win Grand Prix. So, yeah, I think Ferrari, they've got to be aiming, I think, for the top 4. I think finishing 3rd is a possibility, but I don't think they should be setting that as I've seen Binotto in the winter, he was setting that as a minimum expectation, which I think is very extreme, because this team, I don't think Binotto quite realises how poor they were last season. There were certain Grand Prix where they were not just slower than teams like McLaren and Racing Point, they were miles off in the Grand Prix at times, finishing half a minute behind or even more. They weren't just slower, they were quite a bit slower. It wasn't really that close many a time. So I think, again, realistically, they're not going to jump straight up to being what they were in 2019, or even jump up to where they were at their worst points of 2019. They are still fundamentally a midfield team. Top 4 has got to be the aim. Will they get that? It's going to be pretty hard, because you have very competitive teams in there, again, like McLaren, Aston Martin, AlphaTauri, Alpine, even Alfa Romeo, who I think Karun Chandhok of Sky Sports F1 thinks Alfa Romeo from testing were actually quicker than Ferrari, which if they are, then, in this Grand Prix this weekend, then I don't think I'll be able to stop laughing, because that's just, that just sums up this current Ferrari team. If, they go on about, how they've improved and all of that bullshit, and then they turn up to the first Grand Prix and they're not even the quickest Ferrari-powered team. That would just be the icing on the cake. I don't think that will be the case, though. I think Ferrari will this weekend be quicker by, I think, a good margin. Not a massive margin, but a good margin over the quickest Alfa Romeo. But yeah, if they don't improve on last season's result, then this team, I think, has really just proven in the last 2 or 3 years that they have no hope going into 2022 and beyond. Because if they can't improve on last year and those results from last year in this season, then how can they possibly build a car that is going to overtake all of those teams that they're behind currently, for 2022 to be possibly world champions? How is that going to happen if they can't even improve on last year's car, which was, probably the second worst Ferrari car of all time? It was awful. It was absolutely awful. So, big season for Ferrari, I think, because if they really improve and let's say they finish in 3rd in the Constructors, I think that would showcase that this team is, on a bit more of a, going in a better direction than they definitely were, I think, a year and a half ago. But if they don't improve on 6th in the Constructors, then I could see Binotto getting sacked. I really could, because again, if you're a Ferrari team boss, how can you not finish in the top 5 in the Constructors? With the amount of money that they have, the amount of money that they spend, and I know we've got the cost cap now, but, they were able to spend quite a lot last year still. So, yeah, Ferrari got to improve this season. If they don't, then whoever, let's say Binotto does get sacked as team boss, whoever the new team boss is won't have an effect really on the performance in 2022. So I guess you might want to say wait until 2022 to see how the car is. But if you can't improve on last year as Ferrari, then I don't really think there's much hope going forward. to be honest. But I'm going to come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys think about McLaren and Ferrari. Do you think McLaren are the team to beat in the midfield? And where do you think... not where do you think, we'll get onto that later in terms of our final predictions, but with Ferrari, do you think they'll improve, and by how much do you think they'll improve? Let me know in the live chat and also the comment section right now. And also don't forget to subscribe, guys, for more content like this. I will update you guys later on and probably tomorrow on my community tab of my channel page and also in the Discord server as to the schedule for this weekend. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming. 3 streams, possibly more as well. There might even be 4 or 5 if you include the Monday as a part of that weekend say reaction. So yeah, there's a lot of content coming, so don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it there, or go to the channel page and do it there. And don't forget as well to hit the like button and share this stream everywhere you can. I'm just going to quickly mute my mic though to sort something out. Right, I am back. Let me just read the chat to see what you guys are saying. Hello to F1 Simulator Maniac. Right, let me get to the Ferrari and McLaren comments. Crystal Racing says Ferrari's race pace in testing was abysmal. Roughly the same lap times as Alfa Romeo. Maybe that's what Karun Chandok was saying then, when it comes to that. I do know for a fact that they were lapping quite a bit slower than AlphaTauri, but we don't know how quick AlphaTauri are. AlphaTauri might, have a really, really good car. So it might be not so smart to compare them to that. But even, let's say we do get to the first Grand Prix and they're quite a bit slower in the race, than AlphaTauri. That's quite poor because, Italian team can't even be the best Italian team on the grid anymore. And they should be faster than AlphaTauri. Let's be honest. AlphaTauri, good team in that. I think they are, in terms of the personnel they have, I think they are a better team, quality-wise, than Ferrari. But with the amount of money Ferrari have and resources, it shouldn't be close. But, that's Ferrari for you. They always manage to surprise you as to how shit they can be with so much money. Enzo rolls in grave. Been rolling in the grave for a long time. Let me look for some more comments here. Brabham says it's become pretty obvious that Ferrari need a complete management restructure. They do, but the problem is, and I've worked this out, is they've been unable to do this really since, say, after the first few races of 2020, because they can't really do it this year because, again, the new boss will have to then accept, say if there are poor results this season, he'll have to accept those, and then he will have to accept 2022 and those results possibly being poor as well, when those results don't really have anything to do with him because he hasn't had a proper effect. So for a new team boss to have an effect on Ferrari's future, you would have had to have hired him, halfway through last year, say when the season started, when, to be honest, there were rumours that Binotto's job was, up for grabs. And to be honest, I think he should have been let go because last season was just so poor, and I don't see how, the season he had doesn't constitute a sackable, or the sack itself. I don't see why he should have stayed as team boss. I don't care for, he's nice. He's nice to the media. Fuck that. Results matter. And he's driven this team so far back. And even that's what's, and I've said this so many times, but I'll say it again. Binotto is so bad as team boss, he's put Ferrari in a worse position than when Maurizio Arrivabene found it in. Because at least in 2014, at the end of 2014, yeah, Ferrari was slow, and, you know, in the constructors didn't finish that well, but they still finished in 4th. They weren't 6th, where they were last season. And let's say this season they don't really improve, and AlphaTauri really improve, it could be 7th. You know, and then let's say Alfa Romeo are much better, could be 8th. He's putting this team into a position that they've not been in a very long time, into a position that is almost, especially with the new cost cap coming up, which I think will harm teams like Ferrari being able to just be better than other teams purely down to spending and resources. You know, that could end up putting this team in a position that is almost impossible to recover from. So I don't see how he can keep his job, to be honest. If there wasn't a new set of regulations for next year, I think his job definitely would be up for grabs. You know, right now even. Let's read a few more comments and then we'll get on to the next couple midfield teams, which are Aston Martin and Alpine. Ed Cantwell says Ferrari need to focus everything into 2022. Let's hope they're doing that, but again, this is Ferrari. You don't know what they're doing. Crystal Racing says Ferrari's corporate structure since Marchioni's death is not fit to create a top F1 team. Not sure they're ready to drop their Italian heavy management style yet. That's another thing that does need to that needs to change, because, you know, it's great having a homegrown I guess, you know, thing at your team if you are Italian. But Ferrari, you know, when they were last dominant in 2000 or the early to mid 2000s, they had a lot of people in their team who weren't Italian. They were, you know, the best people from different countries and different teams. You know, Ross Brawn from Benetton, and then Jean Todt from the, was it Peugeot sports car program, and then Rory Byrne from Benetton. It wasn't, you know, let's find the best Italians and put them in charge of the team, because if that, you know, if that's what Ferrari with Luca Di Montezemolo, if that's what they tried to do in the late 90s, early 2000s, instead of hiring Jean Todt, Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, so on and so forth, you've heard the story a million times, they wouldn't have won a championship in that era at all. And they wouldn't have won one in, you know, 2007 with Raikkonen, because the reason Raikkonen was able to win that was because the foundations were already laid from the successful period that, you know, preceded him being there, which is why he was, you know, so great that season and was able to win the championship. So, you know, Ferrari's run of not winning titles, if it wasn't for bringing those people in, it would still be going since 1979. For the Drivers' Championship. Of course, for the Constructors, it would be, well, since 1983, I think, was the last Constructors' title, before they won it again in 1999. So, they, as you say, they've got to drop that, because that's not working at all. And I think they've got to. And I've heard this before in a different sport. Gary Neville, if any of you know, ex-Manchester United footballer and amazing pundit, has said this before in regards to his club, Manchester United, where he said that they need to hire the best in class. That's what Ferrari need to do, to a T. They need to go for the best people in the, you know, for the best roles, instead of the Italian element playing a factor. It shouldn't play a factor. It should be, right, who are the best designers out there? Let's go and get them. And if they don't get them, fine. Try and get the next best one, and so on and so forth. You know, Ferrari could have gone and got James Key before McLaren did. Someone who highly rated for a long time. And I said, I think on my old channel, that James Key should be, you know, at a top team. And if any top team is looking for a designer, he should definitely be, you know, up there. And now look at him, gone to McLaren, and McLaren have improved ever since and have shown the kind of improvement that Ferrari have been desperately needing since James Key has gone to McLaren. Because since James Key's gone to McLaren, Ferrari have, slowly but surely got worse. Because they've not really had a technical direction since Matteo Binotto took over the team. Because he was the technical director, now he became team boss, and then he was still technical director, and then he, left the technical director role to become the full team boss, and Ferrari haven't effectively had a proper technical director since Binotto replaced Arriva Bene as team boss. And I still believe that Binotto is the de facto technical director, just not in name. So yeah, Ferrari, they need to just look, again, who is the best, drivers, technical people, for the, aerodynamics, chassis, power units, all of that, and go for the best people. Because the strong majority of those people, if they go after them, are going to say yes to Ferrari. The only thing putting them off that I've seen in the past is, if they live in a different country, is having to move their family or be away from their family. But, if that is not something of a concern that those particular people will be willing to turn down Ferrari for, then, go for them. Better doing that than, again, just going with this homegrown element that isn't working. Because I can tell you now, with the money and resources Ferrari have, they are doing so poorly compared to what they, the potential they have with, again, the money and resources they possess. If F1 had the same amount of money to spend, Ferrari, I think, would be basically at the back of the grid, because they are not producing, and haven't for a couple years, anything really, game-changing, which you should if you're at Ferrari. Anyway, I think we'll move on from there. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about when it comes to Ferrari in 2021. I ain't going to jump the gun and say they're going to be, have an awful season if they do have a poor Bahrain Grand Prix, because Bahrain is a very particular track. And they'll probably be at a different part of the grid when we get to Imola and then Portimao. So I think we need to wait. I'd say that it's probably the case with almost all the teams this season. We need to wait until probably after the Spanish Grand Prix to when we can say, right, this is the pecking order for the season, basically. I think we need to wait till then, because Bahrain is a power track. Imola is a very quick race track, but has its sections where you do need good amounts of grip. But it's a very weird racetrack. It's not a, you don't need a particularly slippery car, but you don't necessarily need to have the best aerodynamics to, qualify or race well there. But when we get to Portimao and Spain, Barcelona, those tracks you do need very good amounts of grip. So yeah, I think once those things have been tested, then I think we'll get a good idea of who is where. Anyway, let's get on to the rest. So Aston Martin didn't have that good of a testing program in terms of reliability, didn't do much running, but I still think that this team are looking good. I don't think Aston Martin will be... I don't think they'll be as strong as last year in terms of pace, because I think McLaren will be better, Ferrari will be better, AlphaTauri will be better. And I think that will give Aston Martin a lot tougher of a time than they had at certain points in 2020, when they were Racing Point, of course. I still think they will be playing a massive part in the fight for third in the Constructors. I still think they'll be right there with McLaren on results, and it'll go down to the wire. With teams like, again, McLaren, Ferrari, Alpine, AlphaTauri, as to who finishes where in the Constructors' Championship. I do, though, think that Aston Martin, I think they will start the season off a bit slow. One, because the lack of running and testing definitely did not help, because they couldn't really, with the time they missed, they couldn't really find a balance or really know how the car was over a single lap properly in testing. So they will start off, I think, the first couple races a bit behind. Also, reliability might be an issue for them. But I think once we get into definitely the second half of the season, but I think once we start getting to, say, around the Monaco Grand Prix, I think this team will really start to kick on and score some big points and be up there with McLaren and teams like that. Might not start the season off that way. I think they might start the season off only getting, 8th place or 9th place here or there. But as time goes on, I think this team will improve as the season goes on. Sebastian Vettel, I think, will have a good season. I think first half of the season, he'll be a bit hit and miss. He'll have one good race and probably one bad race. Not necessarily a bad race because of him, but again, the car might not quite be there for him. But again, once we get into the second half of the season, I think Sebastian, once he's comfortable with the team, comfortable with the car, and the team really kicks on, which I think they will, I think he will be flying along, and I think he'll have a very good season, and we'll see a bit more of the old Sebastian Vettel. Lance Stroll, very keen to see what he can do this year. We'll get onto the drivers a bit later on, but I'm very keen to see what he can do for the team and whether he can really help the team get up there with McLaren for third in the Constructors, because I think his performance last season was very important to why they finished fourth, because there were a few races where he just was a bit non-existent in terms of results, not necessarily in terms of speed. His speed was fine, but his results were just lacking compared to what Perez was doing. So it'll be interesting to see what he can contribute, but I think this team are still going to be a force without a doubt, and they'll definitely be stronger, I think, at the first Grand Prix than people expect. I still think they'll end up seriously challenging for points. You'll see a lot of them, trust me, in the first Grand Prix. So yeah, looking forward to see what Aston Martin can do. And I think another, top 4, top 5 season, I think is definitely on the cards. Next up is Alpine. Now, this team, for me, is the most curious team on the grid, because last season, they ended the season pretty good compared to how they started it. I think they had probably the quickest car in a straight line, last year. Maybe not the best power unit overall, because I do think the Renault of last year was set up to be a bit slippery, if I can speak, in a straight line compared to, say, the Mercedes or the Racing Point, who I think those cars were set up a bit more aerodynamically centered rather than, centered on having good straight line speed. So, I think they had a better season last season, even though the result wasn't any different to 2019. Car looked a lot better. And I think going into this season with, having Fernando Alonso in the car, if Alonso can be as great as he was a few years ago, then I don't see why this team can't be right up there. But if you look at testing and the pace that we think they have, there was just nothing that we saw that suggested that this team is going to play a absolutely gigantic role in the upper midfield fight. I think they will have plenty of races where they score points in that, but yeah, I just don't see this team being as good or as close last season as they were to the front of the midfield on pace. Because they have Fernando Alonso, though, they might still end up scoring quite a lot of points, but again, because of testing, we didn't really see how or what their pace was. Again, I'm very curious to see what this team actually, what their identity will be for this season, because they could have one of the top 4 cars on the grid, or they could be really poor and be back there with Alfa Romeo and not even be in the top 10. It really could be that season for Alpine. I don't really know what to say with this team. The only thing I can say is reliability from testing was very good, which was an issue last year. So it looks as though they have improved on that. But in terms of the pure pace of the car, I don't think any of us can say categorically this team is, going to be right up there with McLaren and Aston Martin. we can't say that right now. I hope they are, because I really do like Fernando Alonso. Great driver, one of my inspirations. I just really hope that they can give him something that can, see him in that fight on a regular basis, because we do need it. We need him up there on the grid. And even if the Alpine car's a bit more, say, poor than we think it'll be, I think Fernando still will play a role this season. He'll still score plenty of points. I have no doubt about that. Next up is AlphaTauri, and I think this team will be the most improved team of 2021 compared to 2020. In 2020, I think they had, on pure pace, they probably had one of the top, say, 6 cars on the grid. Of course, they finished P7 because Ferrari, I think, were a bit more consistent in that midfield fight compared to AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri a lot would have a very good result for a couple races and then would kind of dip for another couple races. So if AlphaTauri can start the season off as quick as I think they can, and they and they are a bit more consistent, consistently up there rather than just up there for a couple races here and there, then I think this team can cause some damage in 2021. How much damage can they cause? Hard to say again because of how close the midfield pack is, but I think AlphaTauri definitely are looking strong. I think for the first Grand Prix, AlphaTauri should be definitely top 10 runners for the first Grand Prix. Don't really see it being any different than that. And maybe the second Grand Prix at Imola, I think they'll be up there as well. But after that, it's going to be hard to say because we don't know how they'll improve, whether they will improve or not, whether, Ferrari or Aston or Alpine or Alfa Romeo will improve. Again, it's going to be hard to say. So I think AlphaTauri, I think the biggest key, if they are going to finish, say, in the top 5 in the Constructors, which I think, given that this is the last season with these types of cars, that has got to be the aim for them, to go ambitious and to just go for it, because, if they finish, 6th in the Constructors, yeah, that's a decent result, but they finished there 2 years ago as Toro Rosso. They should have finished there last year. It's not really massively different to where they normally are. I don't think they've ever finished top 5 in the Constructors before, so, that would be something great and new for them, and I think that's got to be the aim. Car looks very good. Pierre Gasly still looks very good. I think this team is still going to be definitely a dark horse and a force to be reckoned with at times in 2021. Now, get into the final 3 teams, and then we'll come to you guys briefly before we get into the drivers. Alfa Romeo. I think Alfa Romeo will definitely be another one of those teams who have improved massively on 2020. They'll be a lot closer, for sure, to the rest of the midfield. But ultimately, I still don't believe this team will be able to climb really any higher than where they have been for the last couple of years, for a couple of reasons. One, I think they're too tightly... their relationship to Ferrari is too close, to the point where Ferrari's poor form and poor just everything is actually having too much of an effect on Alfa Romeo, when I think if Alfa Romeo were a bit more independent, I think Alfa Romeo probably would have had a better season in the last couple of years. Because, again, they've been a bit too tightly connected, I guess you would say. Again, this season they'll definitely improve. I think Antonio Giovinazzi is a massive year ahead of him, which we'll get onto later on. I think there'll be definitely races where they score points. It won't be big points. It'll be, 9th and 10th place a lot of the time if they do finish in the top 10. I don't think they'll be finishing, 6th or 7th. I think that's just a bit too high up, in the order for them to be at this current point. But they're definitely a lot stronger. I don't think anyone is going to deny that. And I hope they do have a much better season. And then the final couple teams, Haas F1. I think Haas F1 are going to be really poor this season. I think they might get a points finish this season. Not sure of that, though. If they do, though, I don't think it will be anything to really shout about. It'll be like it was last year, where it was only like 2 or 3 points in the end. Yeah, I don't really see this team being anything in 2021. They've got 2 rookies. They're not going to develop this car. They're concentrating on 2022, probably the most out of anyone, which could benefit them massively. And I really hope it does, because if we got this team, at the sharp end of the grid, possibly, that'd really help Formula One's growth in America, because obviously American team. This season, they're just a nothing burger, basically. There's just nothing there. They're just basically... they're just there really to make up the numbers this season, I guess you could say. And I honestly think if they could, for this season, I think they probably would not even race this season, just so they could concentrate even more on 2022. I think that's, how much they're putting into next year, because if they do not make a car next year, which is right back in that midfield fight in the top 5 on the grid, like they were a couple years ago, I don't see where this team goes, because the last couple years, they've been a joke. 2019, of course, with the whole Rich Energy thing and William Story thing. The drivers crashing all the time. Last year, the car was awful. This year, the car will be awful, and the drivers will probably make quite a few mistakes. Not because they're necessarily bad, but because, again, they're inexperienced and they will be under pressure. And they will be driving a car that is poor. But I think... I just don't see what they can do this season. Hopefully they can surprise me, but I just don't see what they can do. And then last of all is the Williams F1 team, who I think will definitely be a big improvement on last season. I think Williams will get points finishes this season with this man on screen, Mr. Saturday, who I'm sure will be becoming Mr. Sunday this season, Mr. George Russell. Yeah, I think Williams, they'll have a car good enough for that. I think Russell will probably get 2 or 3 points finishes in 2021. It won't be anything massive. It won't be anything to really rock the boat of the midfield ahead of them, but Williams will definitely be quite a bit better, and hopefully it'll signal, if they can climb off the bottom of the constructors table this season coming, hopefully it will signal that this team is on its way to something in the future that is positive, because they've only been getting worse really since 2014. So hopefully this season is the first season in a while where they actually improve and are better. And I know last year they were quicker than they were in 2019, but still last place is last place. So yeah, I hope Williams can really, climb off the bottom and go somewhere, because we need Williams preferably back in the top 4 in Formula 1, top 4 or 5, because they are such a great, successful name, and it's such a shame to see them down in 10th place. So we desperately need Williams back up there. But before I get on to the drivers, let's see what you guys have to say quickly in the chat about the teams I've just gone through. Crystal Racing, why have Alpine inflated the size of the airbox? I honestly haven't really looked into it, so I don't really know. Francisco says AlphaTauri Imola is going to be really good. Remember their performance last year there? Yeah, they had probably the best car in the midfield there last year. And also, remember, they did their shakedown test about a month ago at Imola. So they already have data for this year's car from that track. So if they're not quick in Imola, then that's really not a good sign for them. But Crystal Racing says, by the way, Simone Resta has gone to Haas. I don't really think that means much, to be honest. He hasn't really... Has he done anything in Formula 1 as a designer that you consider outstanding, considering the money and resources he's had, say, to play with? I mean, when he was at Ferrari, the cars were aerodynamically a lot better than they were now, but they weren't special. And then when he went to Alfa Romeo, the cars aerodynamically weren't, again, nothing special. Not poor, but not great or very good. So I don't really think it'll make a massive difference for them. Let me find a couple more comments before we get onto the drivers. And by the way, I will be not just getting into the drivers, I'll be going into every single driver and giving a preview for them. It won't be a massively long one for each driver because I, have 20 to get through. But I will just give, say, my quick thoughts on what I think this season will be and what they need to really be aiming for in 2021. Blade says he thinks Ocon will score more than Alonso. That's very ambitious, I think. And also says Stroll will beat Vettel. Well, what season that'd have to be? For that to happen. And Nib, great to see him in the chat. He says with the Alpine Alpine airbox, he says it's so tall because they moved the cooling upwards instead of outwards on the side of the side pod like other teams. So there you go. Hello to Michael Arvin in the chat. Let me find some other comments here if I can. Read this one out and then we'll go on to the drivers. From Francisco, who says, I just want Alfa Romeo to be in contention for good results in more races, show some improvement, and hopefully the car allows Kimi and Giovinazzi to drive smoothly. I think with Alfa Romeo, maybe not as good, but it'll be kind of similar to 2019, where they'll be able to contend, but they just ultimately won't have the car to be, right at the sharp end of the midfield with McLaren and teams like that. But there will be chances for them, no doubt. Anyway, let's get into the drivers. And of course, we'll start off with Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, of course, he's going to be going for his 8th World Championship and breaking just every record in Formula 1. That's obviously his aim, and I think he will definitely do that. I still think he'll win the championship. I think he is absolutely the man to beat. He is still at the top of his game. And if Max Verstappen does have a car able to compete with him, he is going to basically have to drive perfectly to beat Lewis Hamilton, because Lewis Hamilton is, in my opinion, the greatest there's ever been. So, yeah, beating this man, basically impossible, I think, for this season. But he should be, even if he does have maybe a bit of a rougher time at the start of the season, let's say if the Mercedes car is struggling a bit compared to where I think it'll be, he will eventually get on top of that and just be, Lewis Hamilton. For Valtteri Bottas, he will attempt for the 4th year in a row now to do a Rosberg. He's not going to do a Rosberg because he's not as good as Nico Rosberg, even though he, I'm sure, dreams of it every single night, but he's never going to beat Lewis Hamilton over the course of a season. His aim for the season has got to be second in the Drivers' Championship, and I think really his job this season is going to be more focused towards battling Max Verstappen than it will Lewis Hamilton, because Verstappen, even if the Red Bull car is not right on pace with Mercedes, Max will still be so amazingly quick that he will give Valtteri Bottas some trouble. Still think Valtteri Bottas will end up in the top 2 in the championship, but I think, again, his focus needs to be a bit more on Max Verstappen, the guy behind, rather than Lewis Hamilton, of course, the man in front. Now, with Max Verstappen, if he does have a car able to compete for the championship, of course, his aim has to be to win. Even if he does have a car able to compete, though, I still don't believe he will win. Because remember, even though he's been in Formula 1, 6 or 7 seasons now, he has never been in a championship battle. Red Bull have not been in a championship battle since 2013. And because of that, you know, even if Max is for most of the season as great as he normally is, because of the pressures of being in a championship battle, you're not going to see the exact same Max Verstappen. Because when that pressure's on of not just winning a race, but also those points counting towards the championship, you get different performances. Look at Sebastian Vettel, for example, in 2018 and 2017. When the pressure was on even more, Sebastian's performance would kind of dip more rather than elevate. When Lewis Hamilton's performance would elevate when the pressure was higher. So if he is able to compete for the championship, you're not going to see the same old Max Verstappen. You might see Max rise to that challenge, or he might do a Sebastian Vettel and dip under that immense pressure of him, you know, trying to beat the almighty Lewis Hamilton. So should be interesting to see if Red Bull can give him that car. Don't think they can though. So I think Max Verstappen's aim has got to be at least third in the Drivers' Championship, maybe second if Bottas has a tough time, but I cannot, in my mind, I just cannot say Max Verstappen is actually going to win the championship. I don't see it at all, not even competing for it. But again, if miracles happen and Red Bull are right up there, then it does give us a completely different complexion for Max Verstappen going forward. For Sergio Perez, his aim has got to be really fourth in the Drivers' Championship. And on pace, his aim has got to be, I think, to be within 3.5 tenths of a second on average to Max Verstappen. Doesn't need to beat him at all. To be honest, I don't think Max Verstappen, when it comes to Perez and his performance compared to Verstappen, I don't think Perez really needs to beat Verstappen at all. Just be close enough so that he can help Max at certain times and help the team. Because of Albon, 90% of the time Albon was too far away and too slow. He couldn't help Max when he was in a close-ish fight with, say, the second of the Mercedes cars. So, as long as Perez can be, again, 2.5 to 3.5 tenths of a second, around that gap on average off of Max Verstappen, he should have a good season. I think he will get podiums in 2021. Don't know how many. Probably 3 or 4. But I don't think he'll be winning a Grand Prix this season. A lot would have to go right, like it did in Bahrain last year for the Sakir Grand Prix. But yeah, 3 or 4 podiums for him. And I think he will do well enough to stay at Red Bull for 2022 as well. Really hope, though, that he does have a good season. Because I've been a massive fan of the guy for so long. He's finally got the second chance, I guess you could say, that he deserved. People say he got his chance at McLaren, but McLaren, despite being a top team the year before he joined, the year after they were a midfield team and even slower, really, than what he left at Sauber. So this should be his first real chance at a front-running team, and I hope he does not disappoint. Now, on to McLaren's drivers. Daniel Ricciardo, I'd say at the moment, is probably at the peak of his career. I don't think Daniel Ricciardo has a very long time left at this kind of level. I think he probably has, say, 2 or 3 more years at this level where he's able to just produce outstanding performances, show great pace and get great results. And I think this season he will continue on that vein of form that he did with Renault in 2020. I do think he will get a couple podiums in 2021 because McLaren will have races where they might even be a bit closer to Red Bull, maybe even ahead of Red Bull. You don't know. But even if there's chaos ahead with the Mercedes and Red Bull cars, I'm sure he'll be there to pounce. I think McLaren will have the third best car this season. As I've said, he's still at his peak. And yeah, I think Ricciardo's aim has got to be 5th in the constructors, in the Drivers' Championship for him. And I think he will have another just great season. And I really hope he does, because if he has a good first season with McLaren, and McLaren next season, with the new regulations, can produce a car a lot closer to the absolute front of the grid, might see this man back on the top step someday. Someday very soon, in an orange car, or in an orange outfit, I should say. And then Lando Norris. I think Norris will be, I don't think massively better or much better than last year. He was pretty good last year. Some very good performances. Still a bit hit and miss at times in certain other Grand Prix. But I still think he'll do well. The only thing is, with the midfield in terms of the drivers being even stronger in quality this year compared to last year and even the year before, it's going to be tough for him because he is still young. He's only been in Formula 1 2 seasons. And, you know, he's going to be going up against some top quality drivers, some of them world champions. You know, you have Daniel Ricciardo, his teammate, a race winner in the past. You have Charles Leclerc, a race winner. Carlos Sainz's teammate, who, you know, Sainz, even though it was close, Sainz was better than Norris in those 2 years at McLaren. Sebastian Vettel, 4-time champion. Alonso, 2-time champion. If Raikkonen can get up there, I'm sure he'll be a tough opponent, as he really has been his entire career for anyone. It's going to be tough for Norris, and I think this season, if he can finish a bit higher up than I have him in my predictions, which we'll get onto later on, then it would really showcase that Lando is not just a good driver, or a very good driver, but possibly able, if he can get in the right machinery later on in his career, to compete for the championship. Again, later on in his career. But I think this season, again, with how high the quality of drivers it is in the midfield, I don't think Norris will finish as high up as some other people expect. Because again, you've got Vettel, Alonso, Ricciardo, Leclerc, Sainz. You've got Gasly, who's still very good. Let's say Lance Stroll improves even further. You've got him. Let's say if Yuki Tsunoda does a great debut season, you have him. Lando's going to have to improve massively if he's going to stay ahead of those types of drivers. So we'll see. But I think, yeah, tough season for Lando. Won't be a bad season. He'll have some very good results still, but it will still be tough for Lando. For these two, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, very interesting lineup. I think these two, I think they'll get on very well. I don't think there'll be any real animosity. Carlos Sainz, he can get a bit over competitive sometimes, but he's not the type of guy that is, you know, he's not Fernando Alonso like. He's not going to try anything dirty. Charles Leclerc, again, he can get a bit over the top and over competitive, but he's not the type of person to do something wrong. I think these two, they'll have their battles on track. I think most of the time, though, they'll be focused on really trying to improve the Ferrari car more so than racing the pants off of each other. So I think these two will have an interesting season. I think Charles Leclerc will have another good season compared to what the Ferrari car pace-wise will be like. I think definitely he'll be in the top 10 of the Drivers' Championship. Carlos Sainz, though, I do think will struggle this season for a couple reasons, at least. One, his first season at Ferrari, and the Ferrari car and team is not in a good shape, so that is a lot of pressure to deal with, which I don't think he can just overcome like that. And secondly, Charles Leclerc is still the man at Ferrari. He was the man last season. The car was basically designed towards Charles Leclerc last season, and I expect that's still the same in 2021. So I think Carlos Sainz will have a tough time. He won't have a poor season, but I don't think you'll be able to come away and say it was a good season for Carlos Sainz. It won't be bad enough, though, to the point where he's dropped for Mick Schumacher or Antonio Giovinazzi, but I think Sainz will have a tough time of it. He'll have some races where he's good. He'll have some races, though, where the pace is a bit poor and, you know, he's not quite up to it. But I think as time goes on, science at Ferrari should hopefully work out. But the man at Ferrari I still expect to be Charles Leclerc. Now, Sebastian Vettel, last couple years has been quite tough. Really, since that mistake at the 2018 German Grand Prix, this man's career has just gone downhill very quickly. From quite possibly winning his 5th World Championship to, will this guy ever win a race again, possibly? It really has gone to that point. I hope he does. We need to see this guy back up at the front. And I do think, not at the front of the grid, but I do think Sebastian Vettel in 2021 will get back to what he was like 3-4 years ago. I think he'll have, again, first half of the season, kind of on and off. He'll have good results, then he'll have a poor result, or not as good result, let's say. But once we get into the second half of the season, say from France, Austria in the calendar on, I think you'll see this guy on a regular basis in the top 7 or 8 of a Grand Prix. Definitely. Because the car will improve, he'll get comfortable, and I think he'll definitely be looking very good in this team. And I think by the end of the season, I think many people have this guy in their top 3 or 4 drivers of the season. Because again, I think he will, once he gets into the groove, be driving very well. Because let's not forget, even though I have criticised him a lot in the past when he was fighting for championships, let's not forget he is still a great driver. Maybe not an all-time great for Formula 1, but obviously for racing drivers, he is great. He is a 4-time world champion. He has a lot of talent. And I'm sure even if he's not as good as he was, he is still easily good enough, especially at this part of the grid. So, yeah, I think Sebastian Vettel will have a good, very good even, 2021. For Lance Stroll, again, I'm very curious to see where he, or how he improves. He should, if he continues the improvement that he has made in the last couple of years to his game, he should be quite good this season. Does depend a lot on the Aston Martin car, of course. Also does depend on, factors like reliability, which Aston Martin are not really doing that well in at the moment. But if he can make those big improvements again that he has to his qualifying performances and to his all-around game, Lance Stroll could really surprise people in 2021. But at the moment, and I'm finding it hard to say that he'll be, right up there in the top 6 or 7 in the Drivers' Championship. So I think he'll be around 9th, 10th, 11th. Doesn't mean that'll be a poor season, because he might still end up getting a podium or 2. But I think, again, if he's going to have a good season, comes down to the car and his own self-improvement. Hopefully, though, he does improve quite a bit. Fernando Alonso for Alpine F1, the return of not the king, but someone who dreams of being retaking that throne someday. He won't be doing it though for Alpine, that's for sure. But I think this season he will have, in terms of his own driving performance, a good season. I think Alpine, the car, will not be anything that special. They'll have races where they're a bit quicker, but I think ultimately this team is not going to be that good in 2021. But Fernando Alonso, I still expect to be, maybe not at the peak of his powers, but to still be driving at a very high level and to still be scoring points plenty of times in 2021. Yeah, I think he'll be, again, just very, very strong. I'd say even this weekend, rather, I think he'll probably be featuring in that top 10, definitely in the Grand Prix. And we'll see that a few times, I think, in 2021. But I think his aim has got to be for this season, considering where the team or the car will be, or where I think it will be. It should be for him to finish in the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. I don't think he can really aim any higher than that. For Esteban Ocon, very make or break season for him, because if he gets absolutely demolished by Alonso, then he could be out of Formula One again for 2022, but not just again, but forever, because if you look at the quality of the grid, if he was to leave the grid after this season, I'm not sure how he gets back on the grid. Not just the quality on the grid, there's plenty of quality not yet on the grid. So, yeah, this really is the season for Esteban Ocon. If he's going to make it as a Formula One driver, a successful Formula One driver, this is the season where he needs to produce the goods. Can he beat Fernando Alonso? Yes. Will he beat Fernando Alonso? I don't think so. And I do believe he will be off the grid for 2022, because I just don't think Esteban ultimately will be good enough to beat Fernando. I hope he can be up there, but it's a very tough ask. I mean, if you look at Alonso's teammates, he's had plenty of, good teammates. Has Fernando Alonso, Trulli, Fisichella, Hamilton, of course. Not necessarily Nelson Piquet Jr. or Romain Grosjean at that current point of time, but, Felipe Massa was still pretty good. Raikkonen, Jenson Button, and the only one to, I think, beat him was Lewis Hamilton, and they still finished level on points. So, beating Fernando Alonso when your teammates is nigh on impossible, unless you're an all-time great driver. And that's what I mean. If he is going to make it in Formula One as a proper success, it's got to be, this season where he really showcases his talent. So we'll see on him. I think ultimately it will end up that he's just not quite good enough for the team, because I think the team do have a vision of taking it still, taking their team a lot higher up the grid, compared to where they have been in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think ultimately, if Ocon performs how I think he will, which will be a bit slow compared to Fernando Alonso, I think they will dump him and go get their new Frenchman, Pierre Gasly. So yeah, big year for Ocon. Hopefully he stands up. Talking of Gasly, I think he will have another very good season for AlphaTauri. If the car is quite a bit better than it was last season, he should be having an unbelievably great season in 2021. Might end up on the podium again. We don't know. But yeah, as long as he performs well and consistent as he was last season, and the car is a step up on last season, I don't see why Gasly can't finish, again, easily in the top 10 in the championship. I don't see why he can't. The guy is still improving. He looks so comfortable in that team. And even though I think Alpine have designs on enticing him to their side of the grid, with the way Gasly looks at AlphaTauri, I'm tempted to say that Gasly should not leave AlphaTauri for quite a bit of time, because he just looks so in the zone in this team. And it really is, his team. So, yeah, I think Gasly is going to have another good season. And I really do hope he can cause even more shocks and emotional moments that he did in 2020. Yuki Tsunoda, his season will be very interesting to view, because he has a teammate who's really performing at a very high level. And now that he'll be in a car that's at a high-ish level for Formula One, we're going to, I think, see in this first season what Yuki Tsunoda is really made of. And if Sergio Perez has a poor season at Red Bull, then I think if Tsunoda can have a really, really good season and Gasly does either stay at AlphaTauri or go to Alpine, I think we could see this man in the Red Bull in 2022. Again, though, a lot of things do need to go well for him, like I've just mentioned. Perez doing poorly, Gasly not going to Red Bull, and him, Yuki Tsunoda doing well. But gotta say, for his performance this season coming, he does have a great benchmark in Pierre Gasly, because, again, Gasly performing at such an immensely high level. Hopefully, Yuki Tsunoda can surprise us in 2021. His aim, I'd say, would have to be, if he's going to have a really great season, it's got to be, top 10 in the championship, his aim. So we'll see if he can do that. That might, though, I think, be a bit too optimistic, because it will still be very close. And again, the quality of drivers in that midfield pack is so great. So going to be interesting to see how he does. Now on to Alfa Romeo. Kimi Raikkonen, the granddad of Formula 1, still touring around. I don't think he'll be going quite slowly last season. Or quite slowly this season, rather, as he was last season. As long as the Alfa Romeo is back to how it was in 2019, he should be fine. He should still be scoring points. And I don't really see a reason why his levels are really going to drop off. I think he will get a few points finishes this season. It won't be anything to scream and shout about. I don't think he'll be ending up on the podium or anything. But I think Kimi Raikkonen will have a much better season and will showcase a bit more of what he still has in 2021 compared to 2020. 2020 couldn't really showcase that much because, again, the car was so diabolical most of the time. But for his teammate, Antonio Giovinazzi, this is a massive season for him. Massive. Because there is a lot of competition to get into his seat from people outside of Formula 1, such as Robert Schwartzman and Callum Ilott, and even more after that. And Antonio's seat is probably the most under threat, not because Antonio is poor or not good enough, but because, there's much more. It's much more likely that he will be deposed of his seat rather than Kimi Raikkonen, purely based on Kimi Raikkonen's standing in Formula 1. I don't think Kimi Raikkonen is going to be dropped from Alfa Romeo. I think when Kimi Raikkonen leaves Alfa Romeo, it'll be because he's retiring rather than being dropped. If Antonio can yet again out-qualify Raikkonen over the course of 2021 like he did in 2020, but this time continue to improve his race performances and get some good points finishes, then I think Antonio Giovinazzi could have that breakout season that sees him staying at Alfa Romeo, and possibly, if there's some surprising move up ahead on the grid, he might even get a promotion up the grid. I mean, you never know. He still could end up driving for Ferrari. I definitely can see it, because if Carlos Sainz has a really poor time of things at Ferrari, and Mick Schumacher still isn't quite developing to be that driver that Ferrari want him to be, and Antonio continues improving and is really quick, I don't see why he won't be at Ferrari. So, yeah, this is the year. If he's going to be, like Ocon, if he's going to be a successful Formula 1 driver, this season is the season where he needs to showcase that. For Haas and these two drivers, Mazepin and Mick Schumacher, like I've said, it's going to be very tough. They're both inexperienced. The car's going to be very poor. I don't really see these two doing anything, and I don't think these two should really have big expectations on them because, again, the car will be so poor, and they are rookies. So, especially for Mick Schumacher, who normally in his first season in a new formula tends to be quite a way off where he turns out to be in the second season or third season. I think, yeah, Mick Schumacher, we need to wait when it comes to him because it's going to be a very quick learning curve, I think, for Mick in 2021. And then for the final two drivers, George Russell, as I've said, I think he will score points for Williams, say a couple times, no more than that. And I think he will have a season that will just yet again prove why he is definitely one of the biggest talents in Formula 1, and why, if Mercedes get rid of, or lose, rather, Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas, this man has got to be getting in that seat as the replacement because, he's on Mercedes books as a driver. And I think this guy is absolutely, without a doubt, a potential world champion. I have no doubt about that. Just look at his first Grand Prix in that Mercedes car. Walks into the car, barely any testing with it, almost gets pole, gets into the lead and should have won the race quite comfortably, ahead of Valtteri Bottas, who is a very good driver. So I think this man will yet again prove how great he is, and could end up, this season could end up also being a bit of a breakout for him, because if Williams are a bit better than I'm expecting and he gets a few points finishes and Mercedes do, change their driver lineup, then this will be the season that convinces them that he is the man. Nicholas Latifi, for him, as long as he improves on last season, pace-wise, and hopefully for him position-wise, then that's got to be good enough for him in 2021. Don't really see him beating Russell at all, because Russell is just so damn good. Don't think Latifi, though, is poor for the Formula 1 level, but it's going to be very hard to see him scoring points this season. Very hard. It's going to have to be a race where there's only 10 or 11 finishers. And if there is, he'll have to do some job surviving, because normally he can be one of those who is suffering in those types of races where things are a bit wacky. If you go back to last year and look at, say, the Turkish Grand Prix, a race where he could have done something, he ended up last and, 4 centuries off the pace. So hopefully he can do something this season, but don't think it'll be anything massive, to be honest. Anyway, now we've gone through all the drivers. Make sure, by the way, to let me know your, comments in the chat as to the drivers and who you think needs to aim for what and how you think they'll be this season. Let me know. And also let me know what you think of what I've had to say. And also do that in the comment section of this video as well. But I want to move on to the potential storylines of 2021. So I picked out 4 that I think, I think these storylines will play out in 2021. These are not necessarily the storylines that will happen in 2021. And there is one noticeable omission from these, which is the whole narrative of Hamilton versus Verstappen. I don't think that is a storyline for this season, because I don't believe Red Bull will have the car to see that happen. So these are the storylines that I've gone for, because these are the ones I believe will actually occur. The first one is Sergio Perez's performance. And the storyline, I think, will be Sergio Perez proving, finally, after so many years, 10 years basically, that he is actually a very good Formula 1 driver. I think he'll prove that he can, maybe not mix it with Max Verstappen, but he's not that far off on pace. I think he'll definitely prove that he is better than Gasly and Albon were at Red Bull. And I think he'll prove, again, to the world that he is one of the most underrated drivers on the grid, and that he is, without doubt, if he, gets the chance, he will be, getting amazing results, getting great results. And I think this season, let's say Red Bull do have the best car on the grid, Perez could end up, if Max has problems, winning a Grand Prix again, but this time on pure pace. If Max, makes a mistake, for example, and Perez seizes the chance, Perez could end up winning a Grand Prix. If that happens, but I don't think that will. But I think the storyline here is definitely Perez showcasing finally to everyone just how great he is. And I think he will do that in 2021. The next one is going to be from McLaren. And I think it'll be McLaren showcasing finally, I think in really this final year before the new set of regulations. Because if you look at the cars we have now, they've been mostly the same since 2017 and that big set of regulations we had for that season over that winter. The cars have been mostly the same. The only things that have changed is slightly the front wing, a bit of the floor, bargeboard area, but it's been slight things. It's not been a massive thing. Fundamentally, these cars are the same since they were in 2017. And I think this season will prove, and if McLaren do, as I predict, if there is a mental race, which there normally is in Formula 1, because Formula 1 is pretty mental in itself. The idea of Formula 1 in itself is pretty mental. But I think McLaren will win a Grand Prix this season in what will be most likely a bit of a mental race. And I think they will showcase finally this season just the improvement that they've made under Zach Brown, Andreas Seidel, and James Key. Because in 2017, they were second to last in the Constructors. In 2018, they were very slow and very poor as a team. They ended up with a better result in the Constructors, but their pace was abysmal. 2019, fourth in the Constructors, and pace was a lot better. Last year, third in the Constructors, and a couple podiums. And then this year, I think it'll be yet again third in the Constructors, but it'll be even stronger with maybe more podiums, and again, that race win. And it will showcase it going into the next era of Formula 1 that McLaren, I think, have finally got there or thereabouts back to where at least they should be in Formula 1. So I think this season we will see that. And I think the storyline here, I guess you could call it, is McLaren returning to the part of the grid where they should be at. And the next one, we'll go on to that, is Ferrari and the improvement they will or will not make. If Ferrari do improve massively and get back up to third or fourth, then I guess you could say the storyline is Ferrari, having a much better season and improving massively. But I think a more interesting one would be if Ferrari don't improve, because of the implications of that and what that would mean for the team going forward, and just how poor they would have to be to not improve on last season. So that is definitely going to be something of a lot of interest, I think, in 2021, and I'm very interested in this, of course. I'm very interested in anything to do with Ferrari, because I desperately want this team to be fighting for race wins and world championships like everyone does. And given, again, the money and resources they have, that should be happening. And it was back in 2017 and 2018. But now it's not, because of how poor they've been. And I will take definitely a big interest in where they end up this season. And the final one, I think, is going to be the return of Sebastian Vettel to the form of old. Maybe not the full form of old, but he will get back to mostly, I think, the old Sebastian Vettel. Lots of points finishes. I think he'll get a podium this season. I think that podium will probably come towards the end of the season, like in the final 3 or 4 races. But he will definitely be much improved this season. And I think the 4-time world champion is going to return to a state of mind of much more positivity. Because the last time he had a positive state of mind was probably the first half of 2017, where he was leading the world championship, looking like he was maybe going to win the world championship, and his team was on a roll. And again, that was the last time he was on a positive type of momentum. Ever since then, it's been downhill. And really, ever since that mistake at Hockenheim in 2018, it's been downhill. But I think this is the season where that'll stop, and he'll get better, and he'll, hopefully, in the last few years of his Formula 1 career, he'll have a very good time, and possibly, eventually, get back to winning Grand Prix again. So, let me just quickly look at the chat before I go on to the final couple things. Ferrari are doomed. Let's not kid ourselves. If they are, then obviously means great content for me, but I hope not, to be honest. Let me just look. James Zhu or Zhao, mispronounced your last name. I'm very sorry about that. Says, to me, Aston Martin is a car that has a great amount of potential. They need to sort out reliability and setups. It's kind of what I think. I think once they get it right, they will really get it right, and they'll be right back up at the part of the grid they were last year. Maybe not as quick compared to McLaren, but they're still going to be very quick in that battle. The third, fourth in the constructors for sure. Tonka says he predicts Aston Martin will finish third in the championship after a close fight with McLaren. Great that you make that point, because I think it is about time, as we get into the final 10 minutes or so of this preview show, I think it's time we get into my predictions, my final predictions for the Constructors and the Drivers' World Championship. Just need to clarify though, before I get into them, do remember I will be giving my full Drivers' Championship prediction for all 20 drivers. And I will be sticking to them. I'm not going to be like, after 5 races, Max Verstappen, I think he'll win the championship or anything like that. I will be sticking by this 100% from lights out on Sunday till lights out on the 12th of December in Abu Dhabi. I will not shift from my position. I have fully committed to this. And make sure as well, when you post yours in the live chat or in the comments section, and make sure you do post it in the comments section, what your final prediction is. Make sure it is as final can be, those predictions, because I will probably come back to those at the end of the season. So yeah, just make sure they are final, because it'll be interesting to see how wrong we are in approximately 3 months from now. Never mind. Almost a year away. We'll probably be very wrong in 3 months, and Alfa Romeo will be scoring podiums or something. Anyway, so in the Constructors, this is what I've gone for. Let me just move the graphics out of the way. There you go. So my Constructors title prediction is Mercedes in first, obviously. Red Bull second. McLaren third. I think McLaren, as I've said, they will have the best car, and I think they will have, with the drivers they have, just enough to finish there. Aston Martin fourth, as I've said, because of Sebastian Vettel, I think, having a very good season. I think Aston Martin will have another strong season, but it won't be enough to beat McLaren, because I think the McLaren driver lineup is just too strong, and the McLaren car will be slightly better. Ferrari will improve, I think, to fifth. That's still not quite good enough, though, obviously, but I think they will improve. AlphaTauri, I'm going to go sixth. I think AlphaTauri will have a very strong start to the season, but I think will drop off towards the end of the season quite quickly, because they'll probably concentrate on 2022 a bit earlier than others, because of the potential they do have to make some big moves in next season. Alpine, I'm going to go P7. I think Alpine are not going to have that good of a season. Alonso will have a good season, but I think because the Alpine car overall won't be that good, I see Esteban Ocon, as you can kind of see in the faded text there with the second half of the drivers' predictions. I don't think the car will be that good, and I just don't think they will have overall a good season. It'd be very similar to, say, 2017, I think, for that team. 8th, Alfa Romeo, who will be close-ish to Alpine. Williams 9th, and Haas in 10th. That's my final Constructors title prediction. And for the drivers, here it is. So I think Lewis Hamilton will win his 8th World Championship, and that'll be, his 5th title in a row? And 7 titles out of the last 8 years, which is, 8 seasons rather, which is just incredible to think about. 2nd, Valtteri Bottas, because I think the Mercedes car will be good enough, and I think Bottas will still be very good. Max Verstappen 3rd. I just don't see Red Bull being, up there like people think. Perez 4th. Daniel Ricciardo 5th in the McLaren. Like I've said, I think he'll be very good this season, and the car will be good. Sebastian Vettel 6th. Charles Leclerc 7th. Gasly 8th. Alonso 9th, and Norris in 10th. That's why I said with Norris that I think he'll not have that great of a finishing position, rather, in the Drivers' Championship, because Again, look at the quality you've got in there. Ricciardo, Vettel, Leclerc, Gasly, Alonso, even, Stroll and Sainz as well, who I've got behind him. It's going to be a very tough season for Lando, and he'll need to make a big improvement on last season. Not that last season was poor, but he'll need to make a big improvement. Lance Stroll 11th, and then Yuki Tsunoda 12th, and yes, Carlos Sainz 13th. Like I've said, I think Sainz will have a tough season. He'll have some good races along the way, but he'll have some very tough ones as well. Ocon 14th, and Raikkonen 15th, Russell 16th, and Giovinazzi, Mick Schumacher that is, Mazepin, and Latifi. By the way, the last 3 drives on the grid, Schumacher, Mazepin, Latifi, I do not think will score points. That's why I've got those 3 in those positions. So there you go. Those are my final predictions, and I'm sticking to those 100 million%. And I hope Nib sticks to his of Max Verstappen winning the championship. I know he probably isn't, because I know deep down he knows that's not going to happen. And I think, to be honest, he believes that won't happen either. Even though he'll say different, we know deep down he doesn't believe that. So let me quickly read some of your comments before I come off, because I've been on stream for how long? 2 hours tonight, and I'm pretty tired, so I think I've covered all I could, really. So let's see what you guys have to say. And again, make sure in the comments section down below, put your full prediction. Don't have to do a top 20 prediction for all of the drivers, but please do at least a top 10 for the Drivers' Championship. And obviously do a top 10 for the Constructors as well. By the way, those predictions, that's not what I think, say the Constructors' order. That's not what I think the order will be for the Bahrain Grand Prix. I don't think Ferrari will have the 5th best car in Bahrain. I think, as the season goes on, they'll improve and they'll end up getting 5th. And yes, of course, Nib says Verstappen is winning the World Championship. Well, we know that is just pure wrong think, isn't it? Tonka says, I like it, Chazza. It will be so close. It will be. I think definitely, if we're going to be wrong, it's going to be between positions 3rd and 8th. I don't see 1st or 2nd or 9th and 10th really being that wrong at all. But, yeah, we'll see. I think it's nominal times in the chat says, I'm going to allow Vettel as high as 4th until he proves me wrong. Well, if Aston Martin really impress us and have a really good car this season, then if he performs as well as I think he will, then I don't see why not if Perez is not quite up to snuff. Norris is not going to be 10th. You're sleeping. I think you'll be surprised. And I also think you're underrating the quality of the grid. Because again, if, let's say, McLaren have a slightly quicker car, compared to Aston and Ferrari and Alpine and so on and so forth, it will still be close enough that the drivers at those different teams will still be able to make a difference. So Charles Leclerc will still be able to have great results. He'll still be able to make a difference. He'll still be able to race with McLaren. Same with Vettel. Same with Gasly, so on and so forth. And because of how good those drivers are and how well they're performing, I just don't think Lando is as good as those drivers currently, which is why I've got him down in 10th. To be honest, I think that's quite generous where I had him, because I originally had him even behind Stroll, because I thought Stroll would, improve a bit more on last year, but I thought putting Norris back ahead of Stroll was more so I think McLaren will be a bit more consistent and quicker than Aston. Nib saying, I'm going to refine my constructor's prediction. Well, I'm trying to think what his original one was. If you want to see what his original one was and how different it is, or how wrong it maybe is, it's in the description down below. if you go to the video where it says our F1 2021 preseason testing review, it's that where he went, I think, was it Merc first, Red Bull second, then McLaren third, Ferrari fourth, and then, oh no, it was Aston fourth, Alpine fifth, and then Ferrari sixth and AlphaTauri seventh. And then I think Haas were ninth and Williams were 10th with Alfa Romeo 8th. So his new one is Merc, Red Bull, McLaren, Aston Martin, AlphaTauri in 5th, then McLaren, then Alpine, then Alfa, then Williams and Haas. They're not too much different from me. Rufte says... and Nib says, do not listen to my predictions. Well, if you go look at the driver's side, I think you'll see an interesting message on the screen that I edited in, which basically sums it up. The top 10 drivers prediction. Rufte says, Kaza, what forfeit will you do if Verstappen wins Drivers' Championship? You know what? If he does, I will do a forfeit, but I will leave the actual forfeit itself up to you guys, so you guys can decide what the forfeit is. I don't see that happening, though. I don't see it. No, I don't think halfway through the season there'll even be a possibility of me doing a forfeit, because I just don't see Verstappen being close at all. Adam says, my constructors is Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari 3rd, then Alpine, McLaren, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri 8th. That's a very big surprise. Haas 9th and Williams 10th. Nib, you're fucked. Probably. Rooksfoot, Lando, head shave. Michael Arvin's driver's prediction. His is Hamilton, Max, Bottas, Perez, and then Ricciardo, Leclerc, Vettel, Gasly, Tsunoda, Norris, Stroll, Sainz, Kimi, Ocon, Giovinazzi, Alonso 16th. That's a big surprise. Russell 17th, and then Schumacher, Mazepin, Latifi. Crystal Racing goes Merc, Red Bull, McLaren, Alpine, Alfa Romeo 5th. Jesus Christ. I know why he's gone for that, though, so it's all good. AlphaTauri and then Ferrari, Aston Martin 8th. That'd be a big shock. Williams 9th and Haas in 10th. Let me see if there's any other predictions here if I can. Don't think so. Nominal time says Mick Schumacher hats for your patrons. Tattoo of the squirrel on your chest? No, come on. It's probably going to be something like a head shave. And, you know, if I ever do a face cam this year, I think you'll see that it'd definitely be a forfeit. If I had to do that. For Ferrari tattoo. Yeah, we'll see on that. With the forfeit. But yeah, if he wins the championship, then yeah, I'll do a forfeit. I don't think he will, though. Because, you know, he's going up against the GOAT. So, I think my chances are pretty good, don't you? But anyway, guys, that is it for this season preview for 2021. Now, let's get into the plan of content this weekend. So, the plan is, the original plan that I'm still going ahead with is I'm going to do a practice 3 watch along the Bahrain Grand Prix at what time would it be? I think 11:30 a.m. UK time is when I'd go live for that watch along, and then the session starts at 12 and then ends at 1, of course, because it's only an hour session. So I'll be live for that. Then I'll be live for a qualifying watch along at I think 2:30 for the 3 p.m. start. Again, UK time. So that's what I'm going to do for, again, practice and then qualifying. And then I will be live for a race watch along at 3:30 p.m. UK time for a 4 p.m. UK time start. And of course, the race will be, an hour and 40 minutes. And then we'll be live probably until 6:15, I'd imagine. But there is possibly other content coming. because I am thinking of doing a stream on Saturday night and then possibly on Monday night. Now, the Saturday night stream is probably going to go ahead, and that Saturday night stream will probably be, I don't know, 6:30, 7 p.m. UK time, and it'd basically be a race preview. The Monday stream, that'll only happen if there is a big talking point from the Grand Prix, or a few big talking points, or a big incident, or something like that. Then that will go ahead. But I think most likely there will be 4 streams on this weekend. 3 on Saturday, and then 1 on Sunday. That's not confirmed though, because things might change around. I might take that Saturday night stream and might move it to Sunday, you know, lunchtime, a couple hours before the race, to do a race preview. I might do that. We'll have to see. But yeah, most likely 4 streams over the weekend, and maybe another one on Monday night as well to recap all of what happened. And hopefully you guys will join me for that, for the first Grand Prix, and hopefully I can have Nib on as well for the race watch along for the Bahrain Grand Prix, and well, get the team back together basically. Yeah, we'll see what happens on that. But yeah, don't forget to subscribe for that content coming up on the channel. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or go to my homepage and do it there. Don't forget to smash a like button. Don't forget as well to share this video absolutely everywhere you can, so people can have a proper season preview from myself as well. Comment down below, what are your final and full predictions for the Constructors and Drivers World Championship? Let me know in the comments, and also let me know other things you think will happen in 2021. Again, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to join our Discord server. Link below in the description for that. And as well, if you want to send me an email for any reason, it's in the description. chazzahdf1@gmail.com. Check out yesterday's video from me and Nib, which is a review of preseason testing. If you want to hear that, then go and check it out. It's about 45 minutes long, I think. So again, go check that out. And until Saturday lunchtime, and after what I think will be a very interesting day of practice tomorrow in Bahrain, guys, until the weekend and the first Grand Prix of 2021, the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix from Sakhir, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.